you have to know you have an issue that requires reconciliation, right? And that means you have to have some level of awareness of customs requirements and customs laws.
Before we get started with the show, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Global Training Center. As trade compliance professionals, you want to make sure that your procedures and documentation are completed as correctly as possible to avoid any delays and possible fines. We provide a range of trade compliance courses that will fit your needs. From in-person or web training to recorded on-demand courses, we can train one or even thousands on your team through your learning platform or on our portal. We can even customize a private session for your team. Go to globaltrainingcenter.com to find out more.
Hey folks, we're back for another show of Simply Trade Podcast, and we greatly appreciate your listenership. I keep saying that time and time again. I cannot tell you how much that Lalo and myself are so thankful for our listeners. Gang, we are trending up because of y'all. It is our more and more people are downloading. It's like all of a sudden we're seeing a mushroom effect. So it is absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to tell you, not only do we thank our listeners, but obviously you like who we're putting on this the show and interviewing and the topics and all of that. And all that's been really, really good. So it's like, thank you again. So Lalo, I'm going to say is that we continue on. I'm looking forward to today's show because we got somebody that's a good friend of both of ours and has been in the industry for quite some time. I'd hate to say it, but he's probably much, much older than I am, but we'll say. I couldn't. I had to get a shot in there.
Certainly not on the emotional level.
No, there you go. There you go. There you go. Touche, my friend. Okay, folks. Who you just heard was George Tuttle. Is it Junior?
It's the third, but yeah.
The third. Okay, sorry. Okay.
We don't really worry too much about that anymore.
That's true. Well, hey, George Tuttle is in, and he's been around since dirt himself. So it's like that's another thing that's good. But Lalo, I'm looking forward to this. And anything you want to say before we bring George actually officially on here today?
No, I'm really glad that he. It's one of those things that we always talk about, Andy, that you pull into your bag of friends and people and in this case, I asked George literally less than 48 hours if he can come on the show because we had a urgent need to fill this gap, and he gladly came on. And I know that we're never going to run out of content to talk with George. I mean, I know we see him at conferences and we can just sit there and just, there's the next session just started. Well, too bad. Let's just keep talking, right? I mean, it just goes on and on, right? But anyway, so I'm glad that he stepped in and thank you so much, George. But welcome back to the show.
It's always my pleasure to talk with you guys. I was just thinking, I'm like a butterfly. I mean, I can just flit from subject to subject or talk about what's new in my caseload, what I see happening and why. And sometimes I kind of scratch my head about what clients are doing and I wonder why they're doing it. So I'm always happy to just kind of talk about stuff that I think can help people deal with some of the things that I see all the time.
Well, some of the things that come up, you look at it and go, what were they thinking? Oh, maybe that was the case. They weren't thinking and all that. So
that would be a super interesting topic to do.
What were they thinking? I love that. You know what? Maybe we do this.
Have you all seen there's a Saturday Night Live skit on that? What were they thinking? It's exactly that. It's hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, we can definitely, let's do that.
Use that for a seminar talk sometime. What were they thinking?
Well, I will say that what we're going to talk about today is getting into reconciliation. So George is going to be gracious enough to try and help guide me into some of this is like reconciliation of what. So it's like in some of that. Now, I got to say that was a big issue when we were talking. I happen to have the privilege of working on the entry simplification working group, and this is where a lot of this came out of, and it has been refined since that time, and it's been a great situation. But one of the things, again, reconciliation, folks, this is a program, especially for a more advanced importer. There's some things here that this is a tool that if you cross your T's and dot the I's, it's a very valuable and a cost efficient manner of handling some things that can change or whatever, where you can update some things. But all that to say, George, why don't you just open this up and say, okay, what is reconciliation, or what do we do here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a pretty good introduction, Andy, about the whole thing. I will tell you, I did look back, and for those of us that have been around for a while, the reconciliation program, it's what we call entry reconciliation. The program has been around since the NAFTA Free Trade Agreement Act in 1993. That's when the legislative concept for this program was created. Prior to that, there was no real mechanism for importers to correct errors in entries, or we use the word errors loosely because that has a big impact on how we define what we can do, how we can use reconciliation. But the idea of reconciliation is that if you know ahead of time that you have an issue with one entry or thousands of entries, literally, for really big companies, you have an issue that you go on to the reconciliation program, and that reconciliation program gives you an appropriate amount of time to get your information together and to correct those entries without the concern of filing a false entry, right? Because that's how we define a false entry, as an entry where or maybe you don't know, but in this case, at the time of entry that value, that tariff classification, that free trade agreement isn't accurate. And so what do you do? How do you correct that without filing a false entry and risk a penalty? Now we don't always see penalties for one or two, but obviously there's situations where customs can come back and you get a CF-28 and it asks a lot of questions about, well, are you related? Do you have assists? Things like that. And if you answer correctly, sometimes you have to say that you do, but you didn't declare them. So you're in a position there where you're exposing yourself to some liability. So the concept of entry reconciliation is that you can flag that entry with an electronic flag. Your entry filer, your broker, or your own, if you're self-filing, you would flag the entry with an electronic flag and a reason, because you can reconcile for different things, and I'll go into that in a minute. But you would flag the entry, and then that gives you, depending on what type of reconciliation you're doing, it gives you either 1 year, 12 months, or 21 months from the date of entry to file that reconciliation. And the reconciliation is basically a corrected entry.
All right. Before we go any further, let's stop for a second. So I want to talk especially. This is something that if you're new to the industry, I want to talk to our listeners for a second and give you a scenario here, George, that let's just kind of give them a little scenario, as I recall when we were dealing with this, and it's been so fantastic, I think, and it's refined if you use it properly. But one of the things that came in is, like, for example, microchips were a big deal. Microprocessors, microchips that would be imported, and there is usually a lot of fluctuation in the value of those microchips due to whatever reason. Not only exchange rates, but the value of those microchips changed. A lot of times, even they would be shipped in, air cargo or whatever, or air express.
Almost like a commodity, Yeah.
Exactly. And so the values would change. Well, initially you would import that in, and let's just say these microchips I'm bringing in, it's 1,000 widgets, and the value I'm declaring right now is $20,000. And then as time goes on, even in the time of release and then the time of confirming the entry with a 7501, the value could have jumped up to $30,000. I mean, the price swings were astronomical in it. Well, okay, now it's worth $30,000. Well, I declared it at 20. Now I'm going to have to adjust it at 30, or it may have gone down and it's now only worth 15,000 or 10,000. I mean, it was just fluctuating. The problem is you're either overpaying or underpaying duties and taxes and things of that nature. So the scenario here is that you would do the entry, they do the 7501 in days gone by, and then at some point, a few years later, here comes a customs audit. They go in and they start looking at it and say, well, wait a minute. There's this wide fluctuation here. If you corrected the value, now the scenario is like, well, you declared it. What are you trying to do? Declare it at a lower rate and then come back in at a higher one, or vice versa, whatever. And the auditor would penalize you in a sense, or it'd be a punitive scenario where that's a tick against you because there's a difference. The values not only change, maybe sometimes the quantity changes because of it's like, we thought we'd shipped out, there are widgets out there and there's thousands of them. And it's like, oh, I'm putting in 50,000. Oh, you know what? There was a shortage. So it's really only 40,000. There were 10,000 of these widgets that we didn't find when we did the inventory filing or whatever. So the quantity changed a little bit. All those kinds of things went in where you do the entry and then the audit would come in and it would be a mark against you. This is a way, like you just said, you could correct the quantity, you could correct the values and things of that nature, and do it in a manner so that customs keeps getting the most accurate information when you are made aware if there's an error or something, or it was presented one way and it's like, hey, we found better information. It's a way for the importer through their broker or whoever to update the information accurately. Customs gets the information, and there's not a punitive effort in this scenario against the importer. Is that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. If we go back,
is another story though, right?
Yeah. If we go back in time, that pre-1993 legislation, there was no real means of correcting an entry afterwards. Many of us now know something called the PSC, the post summary correction, right? We've even had that around for a few years. Prior to that, we had something called the PEA, the post entry amendment. And then before that, this is just going on. We had something called the SIL, which was a supplemental information letter. Those three things, they're great. They're all mechanisms that existed post 1993 to get importers to file the most accurate information they possibly can, and not feel like they're putting themselves in a position to be penalized or to have a mark against them. But the problem with those three programs, and right now we have the post summary correction process, those aren't definitive. I see this all the time. I talk to a client and they go, well, my broker filed, usually they get the terminology wrong, right? But my broker filed a post summary correction and nothing happened. Because, and I said, well, you're right, nothing happened, because customs isn't obligated to accept the post summary correction of PSC. Right? You can submit them until the cows come home, but there's no legal way in which you can require customs to accept that new data. So that can be a problem, right? If you're not following, if you're not tracking that post-summary correction, if you aren't, making sure that it gets liquidated or reliquidated properly, you could be past the point of getting a benefit as a result of that claim. Now, and so reconciliation kind of takes that worry away, because reconciliation is a revision of the entry, and it's a revision that takes effect as soon as you file it. So a PSC was supposed to do that, but there was a lot of pushback from customs on accepting it like that. So that really hasn't happened. But the other difference between a post-summary correction that we have now and reconciliation is, for reconciliation to be effective, you must know that you have the problem ahead of time. Okay? Because remember, you have to get a bond to become a participant in the reconciliation program. And at the time of filing the original entry, you have to have your broker flag that entry for the reconciliation issue. Regardless, maybe it's a related party issue. Maybe it's assists or supplemental payments. There's all sorts of value. Maybe it's international freight deductions. Could be a whole, a list as long as my arm of valuation issues. It can also be things like 9802, you're shipping components to your supplier, U.S. components, and those components are being incorporated into the finished good that's then coming back into the United States, right? You get to claim an exemption for the value of those U.S. components, but you don't know what the value is on any particular item. So again, you can use the reconciliation program to basically suspend that entry, that issue, that valuation issue, until you file the reconciliation entry without worrying about it. Or on the other hand, you're taking advantage of a benefit. You're getting a lower entered value and paying less duties without having to worry about it, or without having to go through a long protest process or something like that. So reconciliation can be very helpful for that. The other thing that we see a great benefit of reconciliation is in the free trade agreement area. Again, a lot of brokers, a lot of importers make a mistake. I still see it. I mean, I just saw it last week, where an importer wanted to file for a USMCA claim, and they didn't have the documentation available at the time of entry, but they did afterwards. And the broker filed a protest, or I think he tried to do it using a post-summary correction, right? PSC. And it was rejected. And the importer wondered why. Well, because the only way that you can file for a USMCA benefit or other types of free trade agreement benefits on a post-entry basis is through what we call a 1520D claim. So it's different. It's not a post-summary correction. It has different elements. It has different requirements. And it includes the fact that you have to include the certificate of origin. So if you don't follow the right procedure, you can lose your ability to get that free trade agreement claim on a post-entry basis. On the other hand, if they were on a reconciliation, they would have over a year in which to file for the benefits of USMCA. They wouldn't have to have the certificate. You have to have the certificate, but you don't have to produce it to customs unless they ask for it. So there's a lot of benefits to using, just a tremendous number of benefits for using the reconciliation program that kind of offset the costs that are associated with it.
And being here on the border, those last 2 points that you had, George, we see a lot of because of the maquiladora or IMEX, however you want to call it. Whether you're taking advantage of 9802 or you're taking advantage of USMCA, I know being here on the border, I know it's a big business for brokers where they do help their clients do the reconciliation, because you're not really working off of transaction value. I mean, how could you, right? I mean, how
Exactly, right? And now that just that brings a whole new set of
exactly.
perfect discussions. I love this. A lot of people don't realize that transaction value is based on a sale of the goods, right? And a lot of times these maquiladora operations, you don't have a sale that's going on, so to speak. It's at the end of the year. You total up all the costs, and the U.S. importer pays for those costs. There's profit, there's overhead maybe, but you might not know what the total cost of labor is, or the total cost of part and things like that go into that assembly process. And you need to use reconciliation for that program. Otherwise the value that you're declaring to customs is wrong. And I know a lot of folks will say, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't make a difference. It's all free anyway, right? It's USMCA eligible. That may or may not be true, but that doesn't give anybody the right to file an entry with false values, and a lot of people think, well, I didn't do it intentionally. Being false has nothing to do with intent. False just simply means, hey, the number should be 10 and you declared 8. That's a false statement, and that's what 1592 is all about. Is penalizing importers for false statements, whether it's the result of negligence or gross negligence, or sometimes even there's an intent there and then you have an intentional violation. So the whole point of reconciliation is to get away from that part of the rat race and give yourself time to build the program, get your data accurate, and file just one entry, one reconciliation entry at the end of the time period that wraps all of these issues up, and you report the correct values, and you're over and done. Again, we see reconciliation, our work, a lot of reconciliation is related party true-ups, assist value true-ups, supplemental payments. I was going to say NAFTA, USMCA,
I keep calling it NAFTA 2.0. I mean, it's just easier. It's like,
Yeah.
Hey, George, but here's the thing, that with reconciliation, it gives the opportunity to, again, make a lot of changes, and you're basically are able to make sure everything's accurate and do all that. But this is for those companies that are trying to be the good corporate citizen. This isn't for a beginner. This is something, or a first time importer type thing. This is something that you need to be established as a positive, good importer, if you will, and company that is crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and then you enter into the reconciliation program. Again, it's kind of getting more advanced, but with that, again, you're trying to be that good corporate citizen, and this is a mechanism that Customs has come up with, that with development with the private sector, that enables them to reward those good corporate citizens. Here's a way to handle this in a cost-effective manner, because the benefit to Customs is you see a reduction of the very things you just talked about, those post-entry amendments, the PEAs, or the all these different protests and things of that. All that's out of the system, because there's a cost-effective manner. It's a win-win for both Customs and the importer.
Yeah. And when you're really good at reconciliation, you can do things like you can have a tariff classification reconciliation if you have an ongoing issue. You can have a value issue on reconciliation. And even if you disagree with Customs, you can still file for reconciliation. Customs this is kind of a step above most things, but instead of filing, 100 protests or 200 protests a year, for a protest for every entry, you can put it all on one reconciliation entry, have that reconciliation entry denied or rejected. You can file a single protest. You can get the issue up to customs headquarters. You can file one entry in court. So there's lots of ways you can use reconciliation to streamline your trade program. What I want to I want everybody to understand is reconciliation is for everybody. It's not just big companies or medium-sized companies. Reconciliation is for small companies that do a lot of business. And the reason I say that is because we see most problems with small companies, with the LLCs, with owner-operators. They just don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the knowledge of customs law. They make a lot of mistakes, and reconciliation allows you the opportunity to clean up those mistakes.
You know what, George, you're hitting on something. So let's talk about that a little bit. It's that, I think we've shown that it's a good tool. If you're interested in reconciliation, you need to get the appropriate experts to come in, talk about it, and go from there. But what would be some of the things that either we can do one of two things? Either we can talk about, if I'm interested in going into reconciliation, what should I do to prepare for that, to do it? Or we can take a second approach, and that would be, what were they thinking? It's like, where did they go wrong?
Reconciliation is just a natural progression. How do you know if you need reconciliation? Well, you have to know you have an issue that requires reconciliation, right? And that means you have to have some level of awareness of customs requirements and customs laws.
Okay, stop. Wait, right there, though. Forgive me for jumping in, but it's like you're hitting on something I think is good. How do you know? I think the question would be, how many protests are you writing, and what are those protests on a year of the entries? What are you looking at as far as any corrections, the PEAs or PSEs and stuff like that you're writing? What is it you're having to do? I mean, that to me, those are exceptions. And if you have a large number of exceptions being a protest, or what it says something wasn't done correctly up front, analyze what you're submitting after the fact, as I always say, being a pooper scooper at the end of the parade, and you're having to go, this is what you're having to do to clean it up. It's like, all right, look at that. That would be a good indicator in a, real quick down and dirty, you know what, we may need to do reconciliation. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. And you could do the flip side, particularly if you have a related party manufacturing. Whether it's in Mexico, whether it's in China, whether it's in Southeast Asia, now that we're kind of decoupling from China. I'll tell you, we've seen reconciliation for U.S. companies that have European parents. And mine happened to be Italian, but nobody got that. Nobody really got that. Yeah, that was why is that? Because foreign R&D is a dutiable cost. And so how many people know that, right? How many people think, oh, is there a portion of that European R&D that adds to the value of the goods that I'm manufacturing in China and importing into the United States? Those are some of the more complex issues. Related party transfer pricing. Who owns those goods? Is it my parent that was controlling the manufacture? We've seen this a lot where there's a multinational company, U.S. operations, but lo and behold, they're headquartered in Switzerland, right? Shouldn't we all be headquartered in Switzerland? But really, and that the company in Switzerland owns the goods that are being produced in China and then imported into the United States and sold to the U.S. company to be distributed, right? Well, there's an intercompany transfer price. And the question is that intercompany transfer price that's associated with that sale, is that a valid transaction value? And if are there post-entry adjustments? Is there a transfer pricing true up at the end of the year? A lot of companies don't realize that they have to report that true up at the end of the year. Reconciliation is perfect for that. So, there's education goes hand in hand, identification of issues. And this is where we get into, you can't really do it. You don't know you have a problem until you look, right? That's called risk, right? If you don't see the snake on the ground and you step on it, you're going to get bit. That's what I tell people. That's my analogy. What you need is kind of a risk assessment. And if you don't have the qualifications to do that, then you have to have somebody that does do it for you.
And nickel and dime somebody on that. I mean, that's something where you really need to go in and have somebody go in and say, you know what, you're fine. Or, you know what, I see some red flags here. Let me, I may not find it, but you need to look in this area, or we need to investigate more in this area. That's what experts are for. But here's something that I think that comes to mind again is that through this show, through many people in the industry, I think you yourself have been a strong advocate of this. There are companies, especially if it's a large one, but even smaller companies will form a logistics council. We'll call it that. And there'll be representatives from different departments, your purchasing or sourcing, your IT folks, your sales, your marketing, your customer service, your transportation, your compliance, et cetera, even legal and all that. So all those people are there. One of the things that would be very wise, in my opinion, and let's see what you think about this, is you're talking through, as you said, you've got to be able to look. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody in one department starts poking around in somebody else's area. That's not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is the objective here is not a gotcha, but let's talk through pricing. Let's talk through the sale. Let's talk through, the cost of things and all that that's associated with a purchase order or whatever the case may be. And during the discussion, well, here's what's going on in our area, and here's what we've done. You're going to pick up on, oh, wait a minute, there's something here. Oh, yeah, we paid for the blueprints on this schematic that was done in Switzerland and sent over to China, and then they manufactured it. And then right off the bat, nobody thinking the initial off of that except a compliance person goes, that's an assist. How much did that cost? And, those kinds of things as we're talking. And that's a logistics council or something thereof would be a good way to talk through some things, get up to speed on what everybody's doing in their different areas without having to read volumes of emails and everything else. And at the same time, help ensure that your company's compliant. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we talk about. In fact, I'm doing the ICPA program on risk assessments and internal controls that's coming up next month. And that's one of the key attributes of a compliance program is that I use a picture. You can use different pictures. An island in the middle of the ocean. Nobody is an island in the middle of the ocean. You need to have a continent around you. You need to have all those other people help you because, frankly, you might know what an assist is, but the guy or the gal over in purchasing has no idea. So your supplier says, hey, I need a new piece of testing equipment, or I need to buy this packaging tool. And they say, fine, send me an invoice and I'll pay you. Boom, right there, I've got a supplemental payment. Well, if nobody tells me, the import compliance manager, that they've just made a supplemental payment that's never going to show up on the commercial invoice for the goods, now I've just under-declared the value of those goods. So, again, you need this logistic council or whatever you want to talk about, however you want to describe it, where you create, these groupings and you educate people and they report back to you. and that helps your compliance team deal with these types of issues.
Let's stop for a second. Again, I'm going to come back to our listeners. Folks, one of the things I would like to throw out there is if anybody would love to come on the show, or maybe 2 or 3 of you, and we can have a panel discussion on how to set up a logistics council and what's been effective. If any of y'all have had experience with that and what has been, good, bad, and different, the good, the do's and the don'ts, if you will, please reach out.
The good, the bad, the ugly, right?
Yeah. There's some that have been good, and some of them probably is like, oh no, I'm just sitting through another meeting. And then when there's a senior executive that seems to be coming on, all of a sudden, oh man, everybody and their dog has got somebody there. It's like, wow, this, normally nobody comes to these meetings. Now it's standing room only. Well, what are you trying to do? And so there's that scenario. Another thing that comes in that is worth looking at that helps you in especially compliance, as well as allowing you from this reconciliation side of things, benefit and all that. The planning meetings, the inventory planning meetings, that's another good one to talk about. Who's selling what to whom, what's going on, what vendors seem to be supplying good, good product in the cycle times you need, or, oh, we're going to have to reroute this and do a different thing. Well, you got a new vendor? Oh, well, have they been vetted properly with the restricted and denied party screening? Have they been checked to make sure they're not part of any nefarious activities on forced labor and stuff like that? Well, then you go through is like with the products and what are we doing? So again, that's just another area in inventory planning and inventory management is another good area for somebody to look at to get up to speed, but then also sit there and especially if you're compliant, this would be a good area, another area to look at to ensure that you're covering everything you need to with your entries.
Yeah, hey, you just brought up another thing we could spend maybe another hour talking about. And that's changes in your supply chain. Right? Changes in your supply chain usually indicate a potential for trouble. So, for example, let's say your management said, we got to stop paying 301 duties. Let's get our supplier to not produce in China. So they turn to Vietnam, they turn to Malaysia, they turn to Thailand. There's a lot of evidence of this happening, right? The suppliers are saying, fine, we're buying manufacturing facilities, we're setting them up in these countries. The problem is and then when those goods come in, they report Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia as a country of origin. Where in fact, for U.S. customs purposes, that origin is never changed because those processes that are occurring in those third countries aren't sufficient to cause a substantial transformation. And the China company is still using all the parts and components that it's producing in China. They're just doing a finished assembly or even worse, sometimes just repackaging in these third countries. We never have really a change of origin. And, you run into very significant trade compliance problems when customs starts to dig into it.
Well, and that's a good point. Matter of fact, we just we're looking at it in some of our forced labor prevention act shows that we've talked about. One of the things that have come up, people have moved away from China. You just mentioned Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand are some countries that people are going to, and the components are still China made. And there have been there was a report a few months back. Customs, CBP, has seized $1 billion worth of goods. What was interesting of that, when I looked at it, we've seen only $80 million of that came directly from China. 400 and some odd million came from Vietnam, and another 300 and some odd million came from Malaysia, I believe, or I may have them reversed in order. But I mean, so 700 and some odd $1 million, was came from Malaysia and Vietnam. So these are like different countries. and they still got C. So that's a reconciliation is not going to fix that, but it's like, to your point, if you're up to speed, the reconciliation should help a compliance area be more efficient and cost effective in managing their entries and handling the clerical type things so that it's not eating them up alive. And then they can apply, the compliance people, their expertise in areas where they need to provide proper guidance to other areas of the company to say, this is going to be a red flag and whatnot. Would that be a good statement?
Well, yeah, it is. You want to be careful because origin is not an issue that can be fixed on reconciliation. That's a different issue. That's a prior disclosure. But the concept here is that you may have supply chain changes that kind of prompt that comes out of your discussion of the logistics council or your trade compliance executive committee, whatever you want to call it, that you have these kinds of talks so that people are aware of what it really means. And of course, the bigger question that we often see is you get executives that haven't been around for a while, and particularly, everybody pounds on logistics executives. And that's maybe a little bit unfounded because what they want to say is don't rock the boat. Don't change anything. Customs isn't asking any questions. You don't ask any questions. Don't look into anything. And, somewhere down the road, the house of bricks falls over and you're up to your ears in alligators, as you might say. Whereas if you have executives that have been through this with a few other companies, they know the importance of setting up these programs and monitoring it. And it's a cost of doing business. Trade is not free. And I constantly try to remind people of that. It's not like going to Nevada and having a factory set up to build your batteries. Sorry, Tesla. Quote, import them into California to the car manufacturing plant over here in Milpitas to install in the vehicles. There's a cost associated with importing, and it's not just duties and fees. It's a whole infrastructure. And we forget about the cost of that infrastructure. We have to take that into account. We have to build it into our program, into our costs, and give our people enough resources to do that properly, and
effectively.
Yeah. Or we're going to end up with problems, and it's going to cost a lot to get out of it.
George, why don't we kind of wrap up here with some things? Is that if somebody is, especially at an executive level, but also in the compliance arena, or somebody's just trying to educate themselves on reconciliation program and all that, what would you recommend for somebody to get up to speed about the program and then the next steps of maybe trying to investigate to say, let's look at this and what would it take to actually implement a recon program?
Well, yeah. I think there's different levels here. If it's an executive, that's one thing. They need to know the broad brush of the program. Whereas if you're trade compliance or you're trade administrator or a logistics person, you need to have a little bit better in-depth understanding. But I'll say this, there's a lot of material on reconciliation, very good material on customs entry reconciliation on the internet. Some of it's my material. Some of it's my prior, PowerPoints. There's a terrific publication by Customs on reconciliation, very in depth, helps you with understanding how to use the program, what you need in order to comply. And then there's programs like ICPA, there's De Leon Trade, there's lots of trade organizations that have webinars and seminars on reconciliation and how to do it. So I think you begin that way. do some internet searching, look at customs publication. You'll need to understand things like customs valuation. A lot of people email me or just talk to me, and we talk about what they might need. So that's what I say. Start small. Don't try to eat the whole elephant, and get some education. See if this is something that's going to work for you, and if you need it. And then usually what happens is the first time you do it, you need some real help. Somebody right there by your side. It's not easy doing reconciliation. You have to get your ACE entry report. If you're not on the ACE portal, you have to get on the ACE portal, download your line item data entry, learn how to carve it up, chop it up, make your valuation adjustments, then rebuild the whole thing, and then make your reconciliation entry. So there's a fair number of steps. This is not a simple or an easy thing to do. But once you've been side by side with somebody that's done it, I'm not saying just go out and hire somebody and they shake the box and it's done. That's not helping you, right? What you need is somebody to show you how they did it for you, and you can build your internal controls so that you can mirror that and you can do your own reconciliations in time.
Help you integrate the new procedures, systems, data flows into that process so you're doing it cost effectively again across the board. So
let me just say this. What usually happens though is as soon as you take the lid off the box and you look inside, you realize that you should have been doing reconciliation 5 years ago. Well, it's great you want to do it this year, but now what do you do with 5 years worth of errors, right? Do you just kind of grin and bear it, or do you do a prior disclosure? That's a lot, that's a lot to talk about. But yeah, that always brings, and then maybe you find some other things, assists or tariff classification errors. Lots of different things start to come out of that.
Well, and the thing again is that when you find it, to me, people say, "Oh, it gets it too complex." No, you need. It's kind of like cleaning out a closet and whatnot. And he's like, "Oh man, I've been looking for that." And it's like, "Well, it should have been trashed." And we're like,
"Yeah, you got to kind of manage the waterfall of issues that are coming at you."
Well, George, I appreciate it. We could keep on with this, but I think we need to wrap this up and go from here from a standpoint that I'm going to tell folks. George Tuttle is definitely, he's a wealth of knowledge, great guy. He answers a lot of the trade questions that come out of ICPA. I know I've seen that and all, but do what he was talking about. Google it and look at it. Put in George Tuttle and talk about reconciliation. It's going to come up with some things.
You don't even need to do that. Actually, you just Google reconciliation, and his stuff comes up like in the first page. So
now, if you get a picture of him, close your eyes. That's okay.
I'm really working on trying to improve that picture.
It's like, it's like I'm like the south end of a northbound mule, buddy. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I know.
All right, for our folks, again, share the shows, make your comments. Please make comments in LinkedIn. Reach out to us if we're not connected already on LinkedIn to us, both Lalo and myself. George Tuttle's out there. This is one of those guys that's going to forget more than we'll all get to learn. So he's a great resource. His contact information will be out there as well with the show notes and whatnot. So, George, thank you for filling in the gap here, and I appreciate you. And Lalo, is like to you and the team, it's like this. I think is going to be a great show for us.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for the invite. We always enjoy talking to you. Great, you caught me on a Friday morning after a hectic week, so it's a great opportunity to decompress a little bit. Appreciate it, and look forward to our next time, right?
Yeah, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks in San Antonio.
Absolutely, right? Okay, margaritas are on me.
Awesome. All right. Have a good one. Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.